Stephen Pulvirent and I haven't caught up in a while in person. He's been busy with a newborn, I've been traveling and working on production stuff when in LA, so I invited him onto the show somewhat selfishly to see what he's been up to. He recently launched a new venture with our good friend Justin Haas called The Enthusiasts, in addition to his creative consultancy Rime and Reason, so I'm excited to hear more about that. The first half of our conversation is heavy on photography chat, and I couldn't wait to ask, what's up with all the blurry photos? I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard Age Podcast. The last time we had you on, I believe you were shooting Griffith Park Observatory and maybe the Getty?
I was, yeah. That was, gosh, how long ago was that? Was that like
2.5 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I was going to say maybe early 23. It tells you a lot about my working process that that project is still not finished, but
I was going to ask you how did it turn out? Because I feel like you tease things from time to time and I don't know personally if that meant it was done or if it's a tease.
No, I mean it's totally, I'm happy to talk about it. It's a project where I made a bunch of diptychs, pairs of photographs, and each pair was a photograph, one made at the Getty Center on the west side of LA, and one made at the Griffith Observatory on the east side of LA, kind of with the Getty images on the left, the Griffith images on the right. And yeah, they're all black and white images. They're relatively abstract, kind of like architectural and environmental pictures. And for me, it started as just kind of, as somebody new to living in LA at the time, still relatively new to living in LA, an opportunity to kind of explore kind of like the imaginary version of LA, like these kind of iconic places, these big pieces of architecture. They're huge cultural sites. They appear in film and television all the time. They're both very much part of the real LA and also sort of the fantasy that LA builds for itself. And I was interested in using them as kind of like a container for ideas about Los Angeles. They're also both places because they're up on hills and exposed. The light is amazing. I feel like photographers are really annoying about this and talk about this all the time, but the light in LA is incredible. I love the light here. It makes me happy on a daily basis. When I walk outside, I notice it.
That's Palm Springs for me.
Yeah, Palm Springs is another great place. I mean, Paris, right? The light in Paris is incredible. The light in New York, honestly, is unlike anywhere else because of the way the buildings kind of shape it. But yeah, the light in LA is just something special. And so, yeah, these pictures kind of explore all of those things. And, it's funny as we're talking, I'm looking at my webcam, and just on the other side in my studio is a kind of magnetic wall. And I have a few dozen, small test prints up on the wall, in pairings. So the shooting for that project is done. Now is the part that stretches over months and months where I just live with the prints on a board in my field of vision every day. And I shuffle them around. I make more prints. I swap some out. I move them around again. And the goal is to do maybe a book, an exhibition, all of the above. Something will happen this year, mostly because I feel like I just need to finish it, put it to bed, and kind of move my brain to something else. But yeah, it's funny you bring that up. I mean, I'm literally looking at all of the pictures right now. They're 6-7 feet away from me.
I don't think we can glaze over a magnetic wall. What are we talking about?
Yeah, so I put up some metal. They're just little metal memo boards from IKEA. And you're meant to put one of them. They're little panels. You're meant to put one above your desk or whatever. I bought a bunch of them and put them up on the wall as kind of a big grid. So I have a pretty large section of wall that is magnetic, and I have little magnetic pins that I can put prints up and move stuff around. And for me, it's nice. I like having the work physical and up on a wall. I don't have enough space to have like giant work tables. So my one work table is for like printing and cutting and trimming prints and doing all of that. And shooting. I have like a little tabletop studio setup. So for me, the best way to review work and look at work and kind of manipulate it is up on the wall. So yeah, I have a pretty big section of magnetic wall, basically.
That's great. No, I love it. You said they're shot in black and white, so obviously I consider that to be somewhat of a restriction, if you will, right? Like they're not color. So
Yeah.
what other restrictions or guide, like sort of parameters have you set yourself? Are you shooting it only on one type of camera? Are you shooting it only on one type of lens? Are you going at only one time of day? Like what's the approach?
Yeah, so the approach for this was I went at all different times a day. I shot the pictures over the course of about a year and a half, I think, year and a half to 2 years.
God, it's hard to believe you've been in LA that long already.
Dude, it's crazy. We just celebrated 4 years in LA a few months ago, which is wild.
It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, this year will, like, in a couple months, I will have lived in LA half as long as I lived in New York, which just like completely blows my mind.
I do a similar calculation for myself because I lived in LA for 5 years and I've now lived in San Diego area, I guess I should say, because I've lived in 4 places in 13 years. So it's more than double. I'm nearing triple my time. And it's just
Crazy.
the fact that I've been in California for 18 years is crazy.
It's wild. Yeah. I feel like California kind of does that to you though, right?
Well, there's no seasons, so time is nothing but a construct.
Exactly.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. You were saying.
No, not at all. Yeah, so I shot the pictures over like a year and a half, 2 years. It was between half a dozen and a dozen trips to each location. I think it was like 8 trips to Griffith and 10 to the Getty, maybe the other way, something like that. And they were always purposeful trips. Like I'm not the kind of photographer who just like has a camera with me and is like shooting all the time. It's just not how I work. I do that for just like casual pictures, but usually with my phone, honestly. But for me, this was like, I have a camera. I'm there to do that. I'm by myself. I have headphones in. I'm like really kind of in the zone. Different times of day, different seasons, different environments, busy days, not busy days. And yeah, the pictures were almost all made. In fact, I'll have to double check. I believe they were all made on an M240, like an M240 with a 90 millimeter lens. There's a handful that I think were shot with a 50 millimeter lens, but just a handful. Most were shot with a 90. It was all shot digitally, which was a huge benefit for this project because I could kind of like easily review after each shoot pretty quickly, figure out what I had, what I didn't have, what I liked, what maybe was like close to something I wanted, but not quite right. So I could make some notes and go back. It was very much a recursive process. Like there's some of the pictures that I think will make it to the final project where they're like the third or fourth iteration of that picture. Like there's a much earlier version that kind of had the seed of the idea, and it would take me like 2, 3, 4 times to get what I wanted. And I don't just mean from like a technical like exposure standpoint, but like, okay, this particular thing is interesting to shoot. This textured wall, this space where there's like a major shadow cast on something, or where I would see like, okay, this kind of works, but I want to shoot this at a different time of day, those kind of things. But yeah, the idea with shooting it in black and white was really to strip it down to its most essential components and to abstract it. The pictures aren't, for the most part, I mean, some of them you can clearly tell where you are. Most of them you can't. They're really meant to kind of evoke a feeling, a sense of memory, this sense that like maybe you've been there, maybe you haven't, maybe you recognize something, maybe you don't. And that kind of like dreaminess, and really the space between the photographs. I'm deeply inspired by Ralph Gibson, the photographer. I had the like genuine honor and pleasure of moderating a panel with him years ago in New York with Leica USA. Thanks to my longtime friend and supporter Kieran Karnani, who used to run marketing there. And it was like one of those real life-changing moments, meeting him. And he's an intense personality and a really fascinating person. And yeah, he talks a lot about he works mostly in books is his preferred format. And he talks about kind of the space between pictures and the way that you can use two images to kind of create a third thing. And that's really what this project is about. And hopefully that third thing is a vision of Los Angeles, which is a city that I knew very little about, had very little experience with before I started coming for work, a little less than 10 years ago, and very quickly fell in love with and really have enjoyed kind of making this place home. And it really is home now. I live right in the middle of Hollywood, and it's a weird, strange, kind of kooky place to be. And I love it. And it's kind of become in a lot of ways my main subject these last few years is making pictures in and around Los Angeles that to me are kind of pictures that capture my experience of moving here and living here and kind of becoming a local, I guess.
Yeah. When you shoot, what's coming through the headphones, or does it vary upon the day?
Ooh, that's a good question. It varies. It's usually something instrumental. I have a hard time. I get distracted very easily. And so if I'm listening to music with vocals, I tend to like focus on that as opposed to what I'm doing. But it's a lot of explosions in the sky. It's a lot of jazz, that works too. It depends. Some like Godspeed, some Sigur Rós. Like I like something that like really kind of drowns everything else out. I'm a pretty high anxiety human being, and so for me, there's like always voices going. In my head, I'm always like running. There's a million trains of thought. And for me, one of the reasons I love making pictures is that it solves that for me.
Sure.
When I'm really focused on visual things, that kind of disappears. And so some nice, intense instrumental music combined with working, with like having a camera in my hand and really focusing, I find gives me the best results. It gives me kind of the most clarity, and it lets me work without second guessing what my eyes are telling me, which I find is a thing. It's very easy to be making pictures and in the moment looking at the back of your camera being like, this is garbage, this is terrible, this could be this, I wish it was like that. And this prevents all of that. It just like, I just focus on making the work and then I deal with it later.
Yeah. I can't tell you the number of times where I've been caught, snapping photos with my wife near me on vacation. And I swear to God, like, what were you talking to me? Because like I couldn't hear anything. Like it's really like if I'm so hyper focused that literally like I can't hear anything. And I think, not to compare myself to a pro athlete, but I'm sure they have similar experiences. LeBron going down the court
for sure
can't hear the crowd, right? Like, and then other times I'm sure they absolutely do, and that also applies, right? So
yeah.
So that's kind of funny. What's the latest gear? Have you gotten anything cool lately? Be it, camera related?
Camera related, I guess about a year ago, I bought a Leica SL2. I'd been working mostly M system for a few years, basically shooting my own M240, an M6 for film, and then I've borrowed on and off and rented various forms of the M monochrome cameras. And those have been kind of what I mostly worked with for my own work. For clients, a whole array of things, SL, Sony systems, like really whatever the job demands, but for my own work. And yeah, when the SL3s came out, the SL2s got a lot more affordable overnight, which was nice. And yeah, I added one. I'd been renting them so frequently for clients that even for getting my own work, it just made sense. Um, and I found that I really, really love the SL. I was a little skeptical at first. I reviewed the original SL when it came out. I was working at Bloomberg and doing consumer tech coverage in addition to watches and other things. And when the original SL came out, it was nice. It was a good camera. But I felt like it had a ways to go. And my kind of attitude at the time was like, well, if I'm shooting Leica, why do I want something that feels, more like a DSLR? And now I think they've really refined it, and I think it provides its own experience. And I shoot it with M glass on it, so I have an adapter, and I'm shooting it with manual lenses. But I love it. It's a great camera. It makes great pictures. It's super fun to travel with. It's heavy, but it's a real workhorse. And yeah, it's been a nice addition to the rotation. So that's the big pickup. I mean, it was almost, I guess it was like 10 months ago, 11 months ago. But yeah, that's probably the latest. The nice thing is I'm really lucky that like I prefer to shoot kind of in a pared down way. So like I've got a couple camera bodies. I shoot basically 2 lenses for everything. I shoot a 50 millimeter Summilux and a vintage 2.8 90 millimeter, the Teleomerit M. It's kind of an esoteric lens from the 80s and 90s. And that's it. Like I don't really need much more than that. Those work for me and they get me the results I want. And I feel very little push to like go get new gear, which I used to feel all the time. But yeah, now I tend to spend that money more on like, printing supplies and travel to go make pictures and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I need to get some advice from you off pod, obviously, about printing, because that's something I want to start doing. I haven't delved into printing, and I really love the idea of like gifting images to people and, things of that nature. And so I would really appreciate your guidance on that if you don't mind later.
Yeah, we'll talk. I was really lucky when I started printing. For me, getting back into printing, I had printed, back a long time ago when I was learning photography, but I got back into printing in the early days of the pandemic. It was a nice thing to do at home. It was a way to kind of like enjoy making pictures without having to really be out in the world.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky that some people gave me some great advice. My friend Stefan Vanasco, who's an LA-based photographer and an awesome printer. He does printing workshops through Leica, and he's excellent at it. Shared some great knowledge in terms of materials and printers and techniques. And yeah, it was nice. It gave me a huge boost up getting started. So happy to pass some of that along.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Sincerely. What have you been shooting lately as far as photos go?
Yeah, so I a couple months ago wrapped up shooting on another project that I've been working on for years, mostly because it's a project in London. So I would shoot basically every time I was in London, which meant it would often be like 6 to 12 months between shoots. So I wrapped shooting on that a few months ago, late like middle of 2024. And that is a project at the Soane Museum in Fitzrovia, or in Bloomsbury, actually, not in Fitzrovia. Yeah, the Soane Museum is this amazing place. There's this architect, John Soane. He was an 18th century architect and a collector, and his home is just like packed to the brim with stuff. Most of it like the spoils of empire, which obviously carries some baggage and connotations with it now. And it's been left like largely how he had it during his life and then kind of curated a little bit, but it's a deeply strange place. I went for the first time when I was a student there in 2009, I guess. And I go almost every time I'm back in London. and I made a bunch of pictures using this sort of like out of focus technique, in color, giving these kind of impressions of moving through the space and the kind of accumulation of knowledge and artifacts and culture. And the way that they both like create meaning by all being in this weird place, and also kind of like erase each other's meanings when you have all of this stuff just kind of like piled on top of one another. So yeah, I'm hoping to do something with those as well this year. I'm still working through the final kind of like edit of the pictures. Hoping to wrap that in the next couple weeks, but I finished that, and then I'm shooting a project on film right now, in black and white, around Hollywood. So just shooting around the neighborhood. I'm not like a street photographer. These are not like, pictures of tourists on the Walk of Fame and that kind of thing. Like that's not really my vibe, but, yeah, it's pictures of the area, kind of the build up, the decay, the influx of new construction, just kind of trying to create a sense of this neighborhood and the fact that it's always changing and always evolving. And there's so much history, but that history is also always kind of like rewriting itself at every moment. So that's a project on black and white film, on Cinestill film, actually. So it's, I thought it made sense to shoot this on what is essentially like the closest you can get to shooting this on like Kodak movie film, black and white movie film. So yeah, hoping to finish shooting that in the next month or two. It's just been a matter of like finding time to get out with my camera around the neighborhood and shoot, but it's all like within a mile and a half of my home, mile and a half of my home. So it's really a close to home project.
Now, is a lot of this residential, or is it commercial, or both, as far as like the architecture goes?
It's mostly commercial. I'm mostly like going down to like Sunset in Hollywood and up and down La Brea and kind of like in the middle of things.
Yeah, that timeline is like erasing quickly, I feel like.
Yeah, it's erasing, and there's, lots of new things happening because of the Olympics coming. It's interesting because I started shooting it literally the week before the fires. Kind of paused for a little while and got back into shooting, and even just since then, some things have changed. Not because of fire damage, but just like the city is reacting and is different. So, yeah, it's even since I started shooting it, it's already changed.
So, not that this needs to be about me, but the northwest corner of Hollywood and Vine, there used to be a club called Basque, as in the region in Spain. And I had a buddy, Ryan, shout out Ryan, there's no way he's listening to this, who used to work there as a bartender. And so in 2007, like my buddy Jensen and I would go to that bar and effectively drink for free. And if you've ever seen Ocean's 11, the like scene where Brad Pitt's playing poker, I think, for the first time, and there's like girls dancing in the windows or whatever it is.
Okay.
That's filmed there. And so that burned down like in, I don't know, 2011, maybe 2010. So now every time I'm back and I mean, that's a major thoroughfare, Hollywood and Vine.
Yeah.
And so it's like every time I'm back there, like that building's just gone. I think they turned it into a parking lot, actually.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
So I missed that. But to the point of like the timeline and the changing of the architecture or the deletion of.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there's like traditionally, I mean, this area obviously at one time was extremely glamorous and then wasn't, and then was again, and then wasn't. And now they're trying to make it like very commercial. I wouldn't say like glamorous, but very, they're infusing a lot of money into the neighborhood. And it's interesting to see you get these real layers of like, you can have a beautiful historic restoration of a building next to a building that like was built around the same time that is literally a ruin, like, has no windows and no roof and whatever. You can have, a super expensive new construction condo building next to like a flop house hotel, and it's like, you can have a beautiful park across the street from a park that like I wouldn't necessarily walk through by myself, you know? And
Right.
it's interesting to see how these layers kind of build up and accrete, and especially again as an outsider, like this is my home, but like it's new to me, and it's a way for me to kind of investigate and learn about that through the ways I know how, you know, like photography for me is in no small part like a way to interact with the world and a way to understand the world and kind of understand my place in it. So it's every bit as much like a personal project as it is about this place.
Yeah, that's great. I want to revisit the blurry photo.
Yeah.
Approach. So on Instagram, when you see these blurry photos on your feed, there's no explanation as to why they are blurry. So basically, if I'm picking up what you're putting down, it's, I guess, to facilitate the idea of creating movement in that space. Is that what you were saying earlier?
Yeah, it slightly. I'd say it can be. So what I've been doing is I've been working over the last couple of years, not exclusively. Like this is not the only way I make pictures. Like I joke with people, like I do know how to focus my camera. Right. Like I know how to do that. I'm
shooting Leica. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I have sharp lenses. Like I can do that. Believe me. Yeah, but in fact, like for me, it's a way to make images that are different. Like it's a way to make images that have a different feel and a different purpose than a picture that's sharp. So like in the same way that I would make the decision to shoot black and white or color, film or digital, like for me, shooting focused or not focused is just like another tool. Like it's another thing that a camera can do to make a picture different than how it would be otherwise, you know? And I don't mean different like to make my images stand out or be different than what other people are doing. I just mean it's a different picture than if it was in focus. And so in the same way that it would also be different if you shot it with a 50 millimeter or a 35 millimeter, like it's all just choices, right? I've been working on finding, it's not just like a random out of focusness. So what I've been doing is working with what I've loosely been calling like defocused pictures. So finding the focal point and then short focusing. So effectively, the lens is focusing on something on like an invisible point in the foreground. And what that does is it gives the sense that if you could just like lean a little closer, the picture might come into focus. Like you just need to get closer to the subject. And it's funny how it plays a trick on your eyes. There's an amazing book I have behind me. It's called Vision and Art. And it is by Margaret Livingston, who I believe is a Harvard professor, I want to say. It was recommended to me by a friend and mentor, Mark DePaula. And it's effectively about the science of vision and how that relates to art.
That's very cool. I took a conceptual optics class in college. So it was all about the eye and like rays of light and using light.
So you're familiar, right? So like the idea here is like your optic nerve processes more information than it feeds to your brain. So your eye processes more information than your optic nerve can feed to your brain. So what you see and what your eyes process is actually much richer than what your brain does with that information. And so the idea with these pictures is that subconsciously, or, you know, I'm not trying to like literally make people lean in, but the idea is that there's something unresolved. There's a distance, there's a tension between what you're seeing and what your brain wants to resolve in that image. And to me, it has the effect almost of like memory, right? Like it's that fuzzy memory where you have a sense of what a place looks like, but unless you have like a literal photographic memory, like in a medical sense, when you remember things, they're never crystal clear. They don't have sharp edges. It's about impressions. It's about colors. It's about shapes. It's about feelings. And when I'm shooting like that, that's the goal. It's not purely an aesthetic conceit. It's not purely like because I can. It's because I want to evoke something. And that's typically what I'm working towards. And in the case of the pictures that I made at the Sohn Museum for that project, the idea is that this accumulation of culture and knowledge and empire and all of these things, like, we don't know what John Sohn thought about them. We don't have access to that. These things have all lived rich lives before they made their way to this home, whether it's a volume of poetry in the library or the giant Egyptian sarcophagus that was literally craned into the basement.
Wow.
These things lived lives and we don't have access to those. And so everything in there is a memory. Everything in there is an allusion to something. And I wanted to capture the feeling and the impression of moving through that space and it's experiencing this like almost overwhelming sense of weight, of burden, of questions, of colors, of shapes, of textures, of materials, and the ways that those things come together. So you might have an Egyptian sarcophagus next to a Greek statue, next to an 18th century French oil painting. And like the way that the light from the sarcophagus like reflects off the sarcophagus onto the oil painting, like that's a weird thing. Like that shouldn't happen. Those things don't by default exist in the same world. And like, I want to capture that. I want to capture that kind of essence and that feeling. And by removing sharp edges and reference points, it's the same thing as like abstraction in painting or in sculpture, where like, if I give you a picture of a sarcophagus with a painting hanging behind it, what you see is a sarcophagus with a picture behind it. But that's not what I want. Like what I want to give you is a picture of a feeling, of an idea, of kind of like a sense memory. And so by abstracting it, I remove those things for you to like cling on to and to bring kind of like clear reference points to. And I force the viewer to kind of live in the uncertainty, in the insecurity. And it's funny you mentioned on Instagram, like the number of people who, like, I've been posting these pictures on and off for years at this point as I've experimented with it. And like the number of people who get really upset about it is, dude, it's so funny. Like people get really angry about it and people DM me about it and are like, can you please learn to focus your camera? Like, it's like people find it distracting. People like think the page isn't loading. People think their phone isn't working. People like want to see what the picture is of. And they're like, I can't tell what this is. Like, why would you do that? Like people get really upset and like, that's fine. If people have a reaction, like that's great.
Yeah, and this is fascinating to me because obviously it is creating an emotion, right? And then there's several things I want to say. I love the coincidence, the dichotomy, the irony behind creating something blurry in a photograph that could solicit movement as the verb of the photo. But yet the irony coming from these things largely haven't moved in forever, right? Like, yeah, so these things have all been sitting still, but yet you're creating this movement in the photo. And I think that's a really, really cool sort of irony behind that. The other thing is you're creating texture mentally as opposed to fit like visually. So what a sarcophagus looks like, you can almost reach it and understand what it would feel like to touch it. But if it's blurry, you're mentally thinking of texture, at least I am, of things like that. Like, what does that feel like? Because I can't really tell.
Yeah. And it forces you to bring yourself into the process of making meaning, which I think is important. I think like, especially now we live in this world of like deep fakes and whatever. And like the idea of photography, some people are saying like, is photography dead now? Like we can just make images of whatever we want. And like, no, it's not. First of all, like I feel very confident saying like, no, it's not.
100%.
But I also do think it forces people who practice photography to ask questions about like, what can photography do and what value does it bring? And I think for me, the pictures I like consuming most and like making most are pictures that ask the viewer to do something. Like they require active engagement. And I think especially when we're just like scrolling on our phones all day, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody, if not more so. Like I see thousands of images a day. That is fatiguing. Like human brains were not meant biologically to see that many pictures on a daily basis.
Or be that subjected to that many people per day.
Right. And so for me, abstracting things like this is a way to forces you to engage with it differently, right? Like they don't look like the kinds of images you see every day.
Right.
And they immediately ask something of you. They ask you to make meaning. They ask you to pause. They ask you to give them time. And I'm aware that rubs people the wrong way sometimes. And sometimes that might feel like rude on my part to like ask that. But I sincerely appreciate it when people give the pictures the time and when people are willing to engage with them, even if the response, like genuinely, and I like really genuinely mean this, if the response is like, I hate this, these suck, like, okay, like fine. I'm glad you took the time to look at them and form an opinion. I mean, I'm sure you've heard me say this before, like, you know, back when I worked primarily in media, like to me, the worst thing wasn't somebody hating something I wrote or a podcast I made. It was somebody thinking it was a waste of time. Like as long as you feel like you got something out of it, even if it was just to like shit on it in an Instagram comment, like great, cool. I'm glad I'm glad you found some sort of meaning in it, even if it's just that. It's better than nothing.
So when you do these out of focus or defocused photographs, are you literally focusing at 2.8, for example, just to make up a depth of field or, a focal point? Are you at 2.8 and then taking a step back physically, or are you turning it? Like, what are you physically doing to create this consistency of blur, so to speak?
Yeah, it depends. So the Stone Museum is a very tight space.
Yeah, it seems so.
It's extremely difficult to shoot in, actually. They actually only started allowing photography during the pandemic. I had for years wanted to shoot, and they didn't allow photography. I was actually in conversations with the museum about having to like come in like after hours or before opening, and like I was going to have to pay to have security guards with me, like. And then during the pandemic, they decided to just start allowing photography, which made doing this project much easier. This is something I've been wanting to do for almost a decade now, probably. And so in a space like that, it's a lot less physical moving around because I just don't have space. Typically, to start when I'm shooting like this, if I'm shooting a lot of pictures like this, like working on a project, you start to get in the zone pretty quickly. And so I start to be able to kind of live in the out of focus zone. So I'm not ever actually bringing things into focus in camera and then turning the focus ring to defocus. I can kind of live in the defocus zone, and I'm trying different things. So when I'm shooting those kinds of pictures with the rangefinder, for example, one of the things I like is that I'm not seeing in the viewfinder what the defocused image looks like. Like I'm not composing out of focus.
I see.
I'm composing in focus with my eyes through a window. And I kind of have to like start to get a feel for like how out of focus I want to be. Do I want to be just short? Do I want to really bring on blur? By playing with aperture, I can affect how those out of focus image areas render. It's one of the nice things about working with lenses I'm really familiar with is like, I have a pretty good sense just intuitively at this point of what the Summilux, the 50 Summilux is going to look like at 2.8 versus at 4 versus at 5.6 versus 1.4, like I have a pretty good sense. And so when I get into the zone, I can really work, like I can live in that out of focus zone. When I'm doing it just like occasionally, or when I'm like just getting started, when I go to the zone for the first, 10, 20 minutes, it is a lot of what you said, which is like, okay, you bring it into focus and then I'm slowly bringing it out until it starts to feel right. And then I start to get a feel for like where I want my hands to be, how the camera needs to feel. And it's like musician with their guitar or, an athlete with their equipment. Like, you start to get a feel for it, and it starts to feel intuitive. And I find the best pictures are generally the ones made when I'm thinking less and doing more. Those are the ones where, like, when I get back and I'm reviewing stuff in Lightroom, I'm like, ooh, that feels right, as opposed to looking right. And that tends to be where I'm happiest.
Oh, that's cool. I've sort of experimented with sort of defocusing, to borrow your term, before. And one of my favorite aspects of doing it and using that approach is that I find that the point of me doing it is to basically make a photograph look like a print of a painting, where the colors are blurring the same way you would use a paintbrush to blur color and create those sort of outer edges of either objects, a cloud or a road or whatever. And speaking of printing, like there's this one particular image that I shot out of the front window of our friend Nicholas Calico's car once. I was riding shotgun with him, and I shot out of his windshield this view looking north on PCH at sort of Point Doom in Malibu. And it's that downhill, kind of right by Cher's house, if you know.
I know exactly the stretch of road you're talking about. Yeah.
And it's just like it worked so well, but I want to print it because I think that image, huge, like in a living room, would be so cool. And awesome. I just need to print it, frankly. And this serves as a very valid reminder. So I appreciate it.
It's interesting you say painting. There's another photographer who I really admire. He's a San Francisco area photographer, Todd Hido. His latest book is called The End Sends Advanced Warning. It's excellent. It's probably my favorite photo book I acquired last year.
Wow.
It's excellent. Behind me right over there. But he talks a lot about shooting like a documentarian and printing like a painter. And I think that's a really great idea and a really great concept. And when you look at his work, you'll immediately recognize that. So I think you'll be into that.
Subconsciously, I must be doing the same thing, that sounds like sort of my approach, because I like sort of a journalistic approach, but yet creating art within the journalism, so to speak.
Totally.
So what's kind of the status of Rime and Reason? Obviously, the last time you were on, we were talking about your upstart of your own business.
Yeah.
And so where are we at in the either growth trajectory of that business and or projects you've been working on?
Yeah, it's been great. It's been really nice, and it's been a whole new experience for me. I mean, I'm new to I've been a part of some startups, but I am new to like being an entrepreneur myself, if you can even say that. I don't generally think of myself that way, honestly. Like, it even feels weird to say it like that, but it's been weird kind of like doing my own thing, let's say. But it's been great. It's been a really amazing education. I've been so lucky to have an awesome group of clients, and I mean that not just in clients who I have now, but I started this in September of 2021. There are some clients who I'm still working with today who were among the first, who like were with me from like September or October. Who I'm still working with on a regular basis.
Sweet.
There are also clients who like, we just kicked off stuff last week, and it's people I had never met before and didn't know, and we're now, doing some cool work together. So
cool.
It's really everything in the middle there. Huge companies, tiny one-person startups who are looking for help and advice. Strategic consulting, media production, like really spans everything, which I find exciting. One of the things I loved about being a journalist was that no 2 days were ever the same. I can't imagine like going to an office job where like I'm doing the same stuff every day. I've got the same meetings at the same time. Like I would go nuts. Frankly, I'm just like, I don't have the attention span for that. But yeah, it's been good. honestly, like, it sounds like I'm just like blowing smoke here, but like I'm busier than ever. Part of that is having a kid, but like genuinely busier than ever. And yeah, really enjoying. I've been working with a lot of smaller independent brands over the last year, and it is so rewarding getting to help these businesses find their footing and grow and find their audiences and really discover who they are and what they can be and what their potential is. And I find it tremendously fulfilling. It's like it like keeps me excited to get up and sit down at my computer in the morning.
Yeah.
And then, you know, getting to work with some of the big guys too, many of whom I've you know, known and worked with in various capacities for a long time. And getting to kind of push those brands in different directions and help them do some of the stuff that, you know, maybe if things were being done by committee in a boardroom in Europe somewhere, like wouldn't get done, but we can kind of like skunk works it a little bit and get creative and get weird sometimes and have fun. But yeah, it's, I would say, maybe since we last spoke, it's kind of tacked more towards watches. I think right now I'm doing probably like 80-90% watch stuff, and I'm excited about it. I for the first like year and a half of Rime and Reason, we were doing like at least 50% non-watch stuff. And I've honestly kind of like come back to watches because I missed it. I love this community. I love this industry. And when I'm away from it for too long, or when I'm not spending enough time on it, I really miss it. So yeah, so it's good. It's fun. It's exciting. It's, I consider myself very, very fortunate on a daily basis that this is what I get to kind of wake up and spend my time doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So where is the intersection with that and The Enthusiast, your new project with our good buddy Justin Hast? And
yeah,
not to ask too many questions at once, but how do you establish a business when you're in different countries? Is it established as a U.S. business? Is it a UK? And how does the exchange rate work? Like,
yeah, it's currently a Rime and Reason joint on paper.
I see.
Yeah.
Is it like a Spike Lee joint in that sense?
Yeah, it's like that. Exactly. I'm glad you picked up on that. Yeah, it's just to keep things easy. It's a US based entity right now. You know, just to make things easy, we may, depending on how it grows, figure that out.
So you sort of pay Justin as opposed to like co-owner.
Yeah, it's just like on paper, yes. I mean, it's like in the interest of full disclosure, it is like a full 50-50 partnership between the two of us.
Yeah.
But yes, in terms of like how the logistics work, yeah, I basically like deal with the like hosting fees and Substack fees and all of that, take the taxes out, and then we split what's left. But yeah, but it's a project that he and I have been talking about, honestly, at this point for like over a year. We're good friends. When I was getting ready to launch Rime and Reason, Justin was one of the first people I called to kind of get his take on the situation. And I credit him into a small part in encouraging me to do it, and kind of giving me the confidence that this could work and that there's work to be done and there's clients looking for help. Because I didn't really know, you know, I was pretty secluded in quote unquote like the other side of the business. But yeah, we just like, Justin and I are always chatting, always like talking shit. And and because it's Justin, like usually positive shit, as opposed to like a lot of other people I'm talking to all the time where we're like really talking shit. But
enough with the blurry photos, Stephen.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of that, yeah, we were just, we kind of like, we realized we were having all these conversations and that we are both like media professionals. And that if we were having these conversations, and one of those conversations was always like, why aren't other people talking about this stuff? Or like, what happened to X? Or why isn't Y doing this? And so we decided to, like, we're in a position to just take this by the wheel and do it. And so we should probably just do that. And so we had talked about a bunch of different ideas. Did we want to do a newsletter? Did we want to do a podcast? Did we want to do a magazine? Did we want to do like, I don't know what else? And this is where we ended up. We ended up saying, you know what? we want to do a podcast, but we also want a place to do some writing. We also want a place where we can show pictures. We want to be able to deliver video if we want to. And we want to do it for people who want it is the biggest thing. So, we just today, as we're recording this, a couple hours ago, published our first newsletter. We published our first podcast last week. It'll kind of alternate every other week. And these first two things are free. I'll do a little self-plug here at theenthusiasts.net is our Substack. And the first two things are free. And then after that, it's going to cost money. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. We'll occasionally do like teaser episodes where you get like 5 or 10 minutes of an episode for free, mostly as promo. Very occasionally, we might do sponsored episodes that are totally free for everyone. But really, the core product, we wanted the people who consume it to feel like they have a sense of ownership and that it's a community. We want to hear from people what they want, what they don't want, what they like, what they hate, their feedback on what we're delivering so that we can deliver the best product we can. And not to say there won't be advertisements. There might be. We'll see. But we wanted to make this something that could exist independent of brand support specifically. We didn't want to be in a position where we want to deliver a product and it's reliant on the things we're talking about to pay for it. It's all very positivity driven. Like, we're not here to be critics. We're here to talk about what's exciting us. So it's not like we're worried that, if we say we don't like something, then, the advertisers aren't going to like it and blah, blah. Like, we're not really worried about that. It's more that we just want to talk about what we want to talk about. And we don't want anyone telling us what that has to be or what that can't be. And we want people to feel like they have buy-in and they have ownership of it and that they're excited to read it and listen to it. And I think if you're paying for it, you feel that way, and, the goal here isn't to get rich. The goal here is to have it make just enough money that we can justify spending the time on it. Because we both have our other businesses. Speaking of Instagram comments, somebody immediately commented on the launch video like, I guess Rime and Reason didn't work out. Hopefully it goes better for this. And I was just like, no. Like, this is like Rime and Reason's doing great. Like, Rime and Reason is how I pay my mortgage. I don't understand. The enthusiasts.
What is wrong with people? Like, man, people are just so angry. I just don't understand.
I think honestly, this one was like half kind of like somebody trying to like poke me and half somebody just misunderstanding, somebody thinking that this was like my next thing.
Well, I mean, you know what they say about assumptions. I mean, it's just kind of like, it's just don't jump to conclusions you know nothing about. Like, that's agitating.
The goal here is just like, if it can justify me spending the time, great.
Totally. Yeah, that's everything to do with Standard Age.
Exactly, right. Like, we're all just trying to do cool stuff that we're excited about and not have it feel like a hobby,
100%. Yeah.
But yeah, so far so good. Response has been great. I've been really excited. I will admit I like get a little dopamine hit every time one of those new subscriber emails comes in, and
sure,
I'm just excited to share this with people. Like I said, I genuinely love watches, and more than loving watches, I love watch people. I love watch culture. I find the industry super fascinating. I think I said this in the first episode of The Enthusiast, but like, I've been working in this industry for like almost a decade and a half now. And I just now am feeling like I'm starting to have my feet underneath me. And that's exciting. Like, it's cool. And I want to share that. And I still get excited about this stuff every day. And Justin and I are still like WhatsApping and sending voice notes and hanging out in bars in Geneva talking about this stuff. And like, why not share that excitement and that fun? And, I don't want to speak ill of many of my colleagues who do an awesome job and who are putting in the work. But like, watch media became super professionalized, and that's great in a lot of ways. The coverage has gotten way better. The quality of photography is way better. The depth of coverage is way better. People can afford to travel to all of the important events, the auctions, go visit manufacturers, produce video. That stuff's all awesome. Like, I'm really not trying to say that that's not a good thing in a lot of ways. The problem is with that professionalism comes professionalism. And like, it's just less amateurish. And sometimes amateurism's fun. And like, I get it. Justin and I are not exactly like amateurs. We've been doing this a little while. We are both professionals in this industry. We are both like consultants and like do this stuff. I get it. We're not outsiders. We're not trying to pretend we are.
It's more human though. It's not as encyclopedic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the goal. And like, we're pretty open about the fact that like, we're not covering news. We're not doing like in-depth, hard-hitting reports. Like, you're not going to read about like the Morgan Stanley watch report, most likely, on The Enthusiasts. You're not going to have breaking news about like a brand acquisition or so-and-so's new thing or like what, like that's not what we're here to do.
Well, when you're putting it out once a week, like you wouldn't be, breaking news,
Sure, exactly. And also it's just like not what we think we're here for. Like, we're here to be excited. We're here to be like, holy shit, did you see this? Oh my God, I saw this thing on Instagram. I'm so pumped about it. Oh, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? Oh, this is a thing I've been thinking about for months, and I just now am finding a way to articulate it. Like, that's what we want to do. We want to have the kind of conversations that like collectors have when they hang out, as opposed to the kind of stuff that like feels like a quote unquote media product. And
yep.
I don't know. Who knows if we'll get there? Hopefully we do. And if we don't, hopefully the subscribers will tell us. Like, that's the other nice thing is there's a direct pathway. So like, if people subscribe and feel like, oh, we're just putting out the same crap as everybody else, tell us that and we'll fix it. That's not the goal here. And we really want to deliver something of value. We're trying to make the thing that we want to consume, which I know is just like the biggest cliche, but that really is the goal here. And like I said, since we're in the enviable position where both of us have like day jobs. I mean, we're both self-employed, but we have self-employed day jobs. This is a thing where we can really do the thing we want to do and figure out the other side of it kind of as it goes.
Yeah. I want to be sensitive of your time. So we've got only just like a minute or two. My recommendation as a client customer of yours,
thank you,
is just length, right? Like 10,000, 20,000 things, word essays. Like, I'm not into that at all. But it also doesn't have to be a 15-second clip. You know what I mean? Like, I think finding a great balance of digestible, 4 to 8 minute reads, I think is great.
Yep.
The 10 to 20 minute reads get a little long for me personally. Again, because it just doesn't need to be encyclopedic, but that's my only feedback. Not that you haven't done anything like that yet because you're brand new, but I'm saying before you think about it, that is my only ask.
That's super helpful. I mean, our goal is like for the pods, you should be able to listen to them while you're doing something else, whether that's commuting or cleaning your house or whatever. Like they shouldn't demand 1,000% of your attention. You should be able to like, mentally wander off for 30 seconds and then jump back in. And to your point for the written stuff, our goal is like the newsletter is something you should be able to read while you have your morning coffee or like on your lunch break. It shouldn't be a thing that you have to like file away until the weekend and then sit down with your iPad and like it should be easy. This is again not meant to be like an all-consuming thing. I'm very thankful for the guys who do the newsletters where there's like 10 things per newsletter and it takes me a week to get through all of it. That's great. It's super cool. I love being a subscriber. I've been there, done that. That is not the kind of stuff I'm interested in making right now.
Totally. Steven, thanks for coming back on the show, bro.
Dude, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
This wraps up this episode of the Standard Age podcast. If you like what you heard, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend or two. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the show as it helps others discover these episodes. It absolutely helps far more than you realize. Shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.